This is Silbury Hill, the largest man-made artificial mound in Europe. And today I'd like to tell you about its history, possible purpose, and its folklore. So today I'm in my native county of Wiltshire, and I'm in the ancient temple complex of Avebury Henge, which is sort of like a bigger, less well-known Stonehenge. And this is part of that sacred landscape. It's called Silbury Hill. As I said earlier, it is the largest artificial hill in Europe, one of the largest man-made mounds in the world. Just to give you an idea of scale, this is about the same size by volume as the Pyramids of Giza. Similar sort of age as well, it's about 4,000 or 5,000 years old. So I'm just going to walk to the hill now, and I'm going to tell you a story from folklore about how this hill came into being. Long ago, according to legend, the devil was in Wiltshire. He was striding across these green, verdant hills on his way to the town of Marlborough. Now, Marlborough, back in those days, was a wicked place, a den of iniquity. And the devil was going to bury the whole town for its drunkenness and its fornication and its very naughty ways. Now, the devil was on his way to Marlborough to bury it when he met a cobbler on about this spot. Now, the cobbler was making his way from Marlborough, where he was from, to Devizes for his trade, and on his back he had a sack of shoes, broken, worn out shoes with holes in the soles. Now the devil spoke to this little man and he said, "Ahoy there, little man! I'm on my way to Marlborough to bury it with this big sack of earth. Can you tell me how far?" Now the cobbler didn't really like the sound of this story, because he was from Marlborough and he didn't particularly want his hometown buried by the devil in soil. So the cobbler, being very quick thinking, said to the devil, "Well, I've just come from Marlborough," which was true, "and I've worn out all of these shoes on my back," and he tipped them out on the ground, "getting there. That's how far away it is from here." And the devil thought, "Bloody hell, all those shoes you've worn out, sod that," and he dumped that earth right where he was standing, which was, of course, right behind me here. That, according to legend, is how Silbury Hill came to be. I recognise that story. It's quite a common one in this part of the world. In these islands, quite a lot of natural or artificial structures in the landscape are often the work of the devil. Before the devil, it was probably the work of giants. Any feature in this landscape is the work of giants or the devil, or maybe a wizard like Merlin, sometimes a god like Woden, that kind of thing. So giants and devils very much crafting the landscape here. But in this instance, the story of Silbury Hill, the real story, is perhaps even more interesting. So I'm getting close to Silbury Hill now. Seems to sort of retreat further and further away the closer I get, because it's magic. So there's lots of theories about the true origins of this hill. Like I said, it's about it was completed in about 2500 BCE, something like that. It's part of the same complex, the same sacred landscape as Avebury, where I now am. And this certainly isn't a defensive structure, absolutely not. It has very poor sight lines to the surrounding area. It's kind of in a dip in the landscape. It almost certainly had a ritual function, but whatever that ritual function is, we can only guess now. The common theory at the moment is that this was actually made over successive generations, so it was more about the process of making it as a community event than the finished product. And there are suggestions that people came from all across the country for specific feast days to deposit some earth from their own part of the world and bring it here. So bringing a whole community together. Now the ground where I'm walking now is very swampy, even though it hasn't rained for quite some time and it's generally quite arid around. That is because this mound was probably once, or almost certainly once, surrounded by an artificial lake. There are two springs nearby. One of them is called Swallow's Head Springs, which sounds a bit rude, I know. They're revered now as sort of sacred springs, and probably were in antiquity as well. So very much tied to water, this monument, as are a lot of sacred monuments in this area. The ancient Britons of this period were very fond of water in a ritual context. So those springs would have fed the reservoir around here. Some people have suggested that the water surrounding this hill, which by the way in antiquity would have been white, gleaming white because of the chalk, so it would have really popped out of the landscape, shining white beacon under a blue sky, green landscape, and water around it reflecting the blue sky above. So it almost would have been a sort of just like an island floating in blue. Must have looked amazing. Some people suggest that that lake might have been in the shape of a pregnant woman, with the mound being the pregnant belly. So maybe an element of the sacred feminine in the landscape. It's not really possible to prove that, but if you look at from the air, it does look a bit like a sort of woman curled up in childbirth. Other kind of maybe more difficult to prove suggestions are that this white mound would have been an eyeball looking up at the cosmos. So almost like the inhabitants of this landscape saying, "We can see you," to whatever gods or great mysteries they bore witness to. All of this, you see, when it rains a lot, when there's flooding, it does actually still fill with water. Some water there, look. My path is blocked by a quagmire. There's a sign there, which I presume says, "Please don't climb the mound." I think that might be new because, well, certainly people don't tend to take much notice of it, especially around summer solstice time when there's normally quite a few druids up there and people drumming. Sadly, on this occasion, my access has been curtailed not by a sign or a fence or the law, but by this lake, which is still in evidence, and that duck, the guardian of the mound. There's another theory about Silbury Hill, about its purpose when it was completed, which is that it was a ritual platform. I said there wasn't great visibility from the top of the hill, which is true for long, long away, but it is linked up with various other ritual sites in this landscape and visible from them, such as Windmill Hill and West Kennet Long Barrow, and of course various points along the Ridgeway. So perhaps it was a platform for a priestly caste to enact rituals. So I will be returning to this landscape in a few weeks' time, when I will be walking along Britain's oldest road, the Ridgeway, which terminates arguably in this sacred landscape of Avebury here. So I will be making the journey with Tamsin and Nero for a few days along the Ridgeway, and we'll time it so we end it at summer solstice here in Avebury. So at the beginning of this video I said that I would explore the folklore and history and possible purpose of Silbury Hill. The folklore story I said at the beginning of the devil dropping a load of earth on the ground to create the mound. As I said, that's a really common sort of narrative from all across this island, the devil dropping a load of earth on the ground to make a feature in the landscape. This isn't a particularly old piece of folklore, probably the late medieval, I would guess. Before, in earlier pieces of folklore, the devil would be taking the place of other supernatural entities, be they giants or heroes or gods. Think Grim or the god Woden making various dikes and ditches across this land. Think of Finn McCool making the Giant's Causeway. Think of the Dagda in Ireland making great ditches with his flaccid cock dragging across the ground. So early origin stories like song lines of the landscape preserved here. There's another piece of local legend about Silbury Hill, which I didn't mention, which is probably older, that it is the burial place of King Sil, who was supposedly buried, interred under that mound, riding a golden horse in a golden suit of armour. Searching for this treasure, many, many, many treasure seekers have burrowed into Silbury Hill, turning it into a piece of Swiss cheese in the landscape, and no golden man on horseback has been found. Just one of the mysteries. Oh, little robin there. So a lot of excavations have been done in the last 200 years. Lots of tunnels dug. This was never a tomb, never a burial mound. There was never a hidden chamber in this mound. What the archaeologists did discover was that this mound was made over a very long period of time, probably about 100 years and many generations. They were digging this thing with bits of antler, remember. It would have taken a long time. It was the Stone Age. Real backbreaking work. Think about the volume of this man-made mountain. Why? So we can see from the geophysical surveys that there was a smaller hill that was then taken away, and then lots of little ones, then taken away, then a ring, and then taken away. It was a very complicated process with aspects of the material, chalk and clay and limestone boulders, taken from very specific places, sometimes quite far away, and a very large community of workers came to make it. Some archaeologists say that the process of making it was much more important than the finished product. Some people even go as far as to say as the end result was irrelevant, that it was the journey of making it. We'll never know for sure. These two ideas aren't mutually exclusive. There could have been a process, a story of making it, but still a end result in mind, or maybe an end result that may have evolved with time. So what could this end result, what could this possible purpose and origin be beyond just a kind of community get-together over many generations? Well, there's two main theories, or two possible theories, and again, they're not mutually exclusive. One is that its purpose is to elevate a elite or priestly caste so they can both see and be seen. This is a really good theory. It's worth noting that the flat top on Silbury Hill is probably only from the Saxon age. The Anglo-Saxons may have put a fort on it, so we'll never know if it was flattened or conical, or if there was a sort of ritual platform on top of it. We'll never know, unfortunately, because it's been vandalized in history. But yeah, it is highly visible from the surrounding sacred complex of Avebury. Avebury Henge, Avebury Stone Circle, already the biggest stone circle in the world. So big it has a village in the middle of it. And there's various other sacred monuments within that surrounding sacred landscape. So perhaps if there is a procession starting from one end of a causeway leading into Avebury Henge, maybe a beacon would be lit on top of Silbury Hill so everything can be synchronized for one of the great rituals at summer solstice or winter solstice or whatever it is. That's highly possible. Remember that the use of this may have changed over time as well. The whole sacred site of Avebury was in use for over 1,000 years, from the Mesolithic into the Neolithic. So, you know, when they were using it in the later stages, their ancestors that would have built it were 1,000 years dead. That's the timescale we're talking about, huge. So, purpose and origin number one, elevate a social or religious elite so they can be seen up there doing their ritual things in the surrounding sacred landscape. Number two, it has a symbolic or mythic function. Remember, both of these theories can be true. So there's a few theories that I've already suggested. The most interesting one for me is that this represents the sacred feminine. The Great Mother theory, that the Neolithic and Mesolithic and Paleolithic peoples venerated some great ancestral Great Mother maybe a triple goddess. This is an idea that has been very popular over time. It does have its detractors, but I think there's very good reason to believe that this is the case with Silbury Hill. It's shaped like a swollen breast or swollen belly. Remember that the Stone Age is the time that we get these sacred squatting pregnant female figures. Think the Venus figurines found across Europe, in Germany, and a lot of them are squatting, birth, life-giving females. Some of them are in profile. Think also of the very many chambered tombs, actual tombs across the landscape that are in the shape of a female. It's the idea that we come out of the door of the womb in birth and we return to it in death. So Silbury Hill could be one of these. I have a personal anecdote to add to this why I believe this is a definite possibility. The first time I ever took the shamanic Amazonian brew ayahuasca, over 20 years ago now, when I was a wee lad, I had a vision. I had the same vision a few years later when I first smoked the synthetic version of this potion, dimethyltryptamine, DMT. The vision was this. It was the same both times. Faint closed eye visuals. The light show is just starting to begin. You'll know what I mean if you've ever taken any of these substances. Geometric canopy above me. It's a bit like Tron, and I'm going down this tunnel, down this pulsating tunnel, and I realise that I'm going towards this dark opening, and then I see there's various hills on the horizon just made out of fractals and geometric patterns. It's two breasts and a belly and a pubic mound, and I realise with shock that I'm disappearing into the vagina of a great cosmic mother, just made out of geometric shapes, and I go inside, and then I'm in some antechamber before I'm shot into hyperspace. It's happened twice now. This was not conditioned. I had not been reading about Great Mother myths at this time. This was all very new to me, so it had come out of my subconscious. So I would say the Great Mother archetype is there in our communal, collective unconscious across the globe. Think of all these finds that are contemporary with this monument. So I think Great Mother symbology there. It's also worth noting, I didn't mention this earlier, that astroarchaeology can teach us a lot. This is using computer modelling to show us what the stars were doing at the time the monument was built, because obviously the sky has shifted over the millennia due to the precession of the equinoxes. The stars of the Southern Cross would have been visible in Britain 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, and they would have risen with the Milky Way over Wadden Hill, if you're stood in Avebury Henge, and they would have set behind the mound of Silbury Hill, possibly because the ancestors are returning to the great womb of the Earth Mother, the regenerative power of the underworld there, connected to harvest, connected to the cycles of the year, and that great solar celestial myth. In short, the sacred landscape of Avebury is enacting the great myth of the creation and dissolution of the cosmos. Maybe. So, those are some of my ideas, my friends, and not just my ideas. If you want to follow up any of this, okay, want a good historical account? Ronald Hutton. Can't go wrong with Ronald Hutton. This is a great book, Pagan Britain. It's quite dense, it's quite condensed, it's quite heavy going, but there's a lot on there on the ancient monuments of Avebury, Silbury Hill, Stonehenge, etc. Something specifically about Avebury is this one, Nicholas Mann. Ronald Hutton has good things to say about this guy. This guy is exploring past theories, but also the new theories of astroarchaeology that I spoke about, talking all about the stars in relation to this ancient monument. Really interesting book. A little bit more far out there, pagan goddess stuff. This guy, Michael Downes, The Silbury Treasure. This is the book that has a lot of the Great Mother stuff in. Look, there she is. It's a really interesting book there. Some scholars might have a problem with some of this. It's difficult to prove, but I think these ideas are pretty solid. Of course, if you want to know more about the Great Mother ideas, there's Robert Graves. Treat it like poetry, not history. It's more mystical inspiration than anything else. A lot of academics disagree with Robert Graves' work, but I like it. Also, a bit of Wiltshire folklore, if you're interested in that. So lots to be getting on with, my friends. As I said in an earlier hungover part of the video, I am walking to Avebury along the Ridgeway, Britain's oldest road, and I will end that walk with Tamsin on summer solstice in the sacred temple complex of Avebury. So my next video will be on the summer solstice, and after that on that Ridgeway walk itself, the song lines of Britain. I'll see you then, my friends. Thank you to my Patreons. Thank you for supporting this channel. I'll see you next time. Ta-ta.